course, he's our favorite guest, and he's here with us. Good morning, Judge. Thank you for joining us today for this big topic.
Pleasure to be with you, Austin, no matter what we're talking about.
No kidding, boy, Judge. This is a huge, huge story. Tucker Carlson out at Fox News, their number one show, their biggest moneymaker, and arguably the one that connected them the most to the Republican Party's base right now. Probably the only voice being against the war in Ukraine and taking many positions that the establishment didn't like. So, Judge, I guess give it to us straight. What was your take when you heard the news?
Well, to me, it's a head scratcher. I'll use the same line I used on Newsmax. I mean, firing Tucker Carlson because of private emails and tweets critical of or denigrating his colleagues is like the 1927 Yankees firing Babe Ruth because of poor table manners. I mean, he was the Babe Ruth of Fox after Bill O'Reilly left. His job is to put eyeballs on the screen and connect with the Fox base. And again, since O'Reilly left, nobody did it better. But I guess he got under somebody's skin. It's still a head scratcher to me about why you kill the goose that lays the golden egg. I know a lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people didn't have to interact with him. He didn't even have an office in the Fox building at 1211 6th, where you and I worked together happily for a number of years. He broadcast out of his home in Maine, and once in a while, when it wasn't being the subject of picketers out front, his home in Washington, D.C. But he brought viewers. He had tremendous influence. Every major Republican in the country was yearning to get on that show because of the audience that consistently watched it. But and you can't blame Dominion on him. I mean, honestly, if you look at the texts that were published, now there are a lot of texts and emails that came out in the Dominion case because Fox surrendered everything to the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs did not publish everything because many of them had nothing to do with Dominion. Some of them apparently showed a raw and unbridled Tucker Carlson. But if you look at the texts, there are other Fox on-air personalities whose words and behavior are far more easily connected to the Dominion case than Tucker Carlson. Lou Dobbs, Maria Bartiromo, Jeanine Pirro. I'm not suggesting they should be fired, although Dobbs has left Fox. But I am suggesting that there must be something more than just the Dominion case as the reason for having triggered this firing, because it's inconsistent to keep people there who caused you more harm and to fire someone who caused you less harm.
I'm glad that you said that, Judge, that it's a head scratcher, that it doesn't make sense, because that was exactly the way that I felt. So many people in the media were very self-assured about the reasons why he was fired, saying, of course, it was the Dominion lawsuit, or it was definitely this, or it was the things that he said on his show that got us in trouble. I remember, Judge, before our show ended in Freedom Watch, everybody was playing the clips of your monologues and saying, this is definitely the reason why they let him go. You remember your almost magical what if speeches that you were giving the final week of the show. Little did they know, of course, that we knew that we were gone by that point. But everybody speculates unless they know what's going on behind the scenes. But Judge, you and I have been behind the scenes. You much more so than myself. The culture at Fox can be quite acidic. And many of the headlines I'm reading this morning are saying that Fox, this is Rolling Stone reporting on this, that they have 8 sources that say that Fox has an opposition file on Tucker ready to go if he were to take swipes at the network. I don't know what Tucker Carlson's contract may be. I don't know if he has a non-disparagement, or if you had a non-disparagement clause or anything like that when you all left. It wouldn't strike me as unreasonable to have something like that. But what do you really suspect in terms of, if you had to put a finger on a motive for why they would do this, what would be your best guess?
Well, I mean, these decisions are ultimately business judgment calls, and they perhaps concluded that even though he was bringing in more viewers than everybody else, he wasn't worth worth the cost. I mean, a lot of his advertisers were not the high end advertisers that pay the most money because they didn't want to be associated with their perception of the things that he said that was controversial. So it may very well have been a business judgment call in terms of his speaking out. You know, there's firing and there's firing. So he has 3 years to go in his contract at 20 million a year. Now they could give him 60 million today and he's free as a bird. He could, you know, go work for Newsmax or start his own podcast, say what he wants. But if they pay him out over the 3 years, the 60 million over 3 years, which is what they've done to all others whose contracts they have terminated, then he is silenced during that time period. He can't do any media whatsoever. He can't do my podcast. He can't do yours. He can't do his own podcast, much less work for the competition. That's usually the way they do it. It's a crushing blow, I can tell you, having endured it. But of course, the time you sign the contract, you don't think this is going to happen. But all Fox is obliged to do under the contract is pay you, in return for which you comply with the other terms of the contract. They are not required to play you. They are not required to put you on air. So my guess is there's no upfront bye-bye payment. They will pay him monthly over the course of the next 3 years, which of course will diminish him a little bit because he'll be utterly silent during those 3 years. And what happens after two of those 3 years? The 2024 presidential campaign.
Oh, wow. This is just, I mean, there's so many staggering consequences to this, Judge. It is fascinating that, a media figure is in such a position of power as to actually affect presidential politics in this country. But the fact is that it's very true. I was listening to Glenn Beck talk to Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly on his show yesterday, and they were talking about whether or not you are diminished by not being on the Fox News network. And perhaps what Megyn Kelly said was that, yeah, Ron DeSantis might not craft his Ukraine policy to appease Tucker now. However, when it comes to podcasting in terms of power, how much power they have, Ben Shapiro has more power than Wolf Blitzer. I would argue you have more power than Wolf Blitzer, for example. I mean, now that there's a sort of balkanization in the media, you have your show, I have mine, Glenn Beck has his show, Megyn Kelly has her podcast and all this stuff. Even though there's balkanization, there's still more power in numbers that certain podcasts have, like yours, which has a massive audience, than, for example, many mainstream media figures have. It's sort of a new
Correct.
phenomenon, and we're part of it.
Correct. Well, look at Alex Jones. Alex Jones has more numbers than the four networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox combined. So if you're measuring by numbers, you're correct, and Megyn Kelly is correct. It's a bit of a blow having endured it, but you overcome it. Life goes on. You turn the page. The first I've heard of this opposition research on him, meaning the preparation for this, is when you just told me a few minutes ago. I hadn't seen the Rolling Stone piece, and I hadn't heard that before, but it wouldn't surprise me since that's the way Fox operates.
Mm. Yeah, well, no kidding. I mean, there was a culture of fear there, Judge, and it was very much. It felt like it came from the top down. It wasn't as if we had our editorial messed with. I know that there's a lot of conspiracy theories about, you can't say this, you can't say that, and maybe like, the biggest talk shows on the network, perhaps they lean on Hannity to an extent, or maybe they leaned on Tucker editorially, but it wasn't really so much editorial pressure so much as a culture of fear that existed there, in order to sort of keep people in line. But now that we're free of those bonds, Judge, we can say what we want, but there's still sort of this deference to the mainstream media that exists on the part of politicians and others. But that is starting to change. Right? There is starting to be more power that people have. Bill O'Reilly still gets big speaking gigs. I'm sure Tucker Carlson could have a big following and have a big podcast online once he's able to speak. But I mean, Judge, I mean, you certainly have seen your star, after the departure from Fox, your star has started to rise again with your show, hasn't it?
Well, competition, improves the product, and you work hard, and the audience will come to you, or in my case, come back to you, just like happens with you. Every time I turn a page, you have more and more people listening to you. And I mean, who's going to have cable in 5 years? Everything is going to be internet. So Fox has to prepare for that. Fox Nation has not taken off the way they would like it to, even though Carlson has a show there or had a show there. I don't know that Fox is ready for the cord cutters, so to speak, which Roger Ailes warned about 10 years ago. He, of course, has been gone since the summer of 2016. Management at Fox has never been the same since he left. I can't imagine Fox management looking Carlson or looking Hannity in the eye saying, you got to stay away from this the way Ailes could. I remember he came up to me in the hallway once and he said, why don't you go to Italy for a week? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, it'll be good for you. Go to Italy for a week. I said, all right. All right. What did I say? Yeah, never mind what you said. Just go to Italy for a week. I mean, that was his style. I didn't have any fear. I didn't have any fear when I was there. And he never told me, don't say something or do say something. He would say, why is Ron Paul on every week? You really think that's going to bring you numbers? And it turned out it did.
I will never forget. I love telling people the story of how I helped to craft the initial stages of Freedom Watch with that memo that I had written while I was still working at the Libertarian Party, where I had copied a memo that Roger Ailes wrote in the 1970s, I believe, in order to start Fox News. Because Richard Nixon had done such a terrible job in the presidential debates, Roger Ailes wrote a memo how to get Republicans on TV, right? And eventually that
Right.
culminated in Fox News. And then, I copied that sort of as a love letter to Roger Ailes. And it was a memo of how to get libertarians on TV and the prospects of Judge Napolitano's Freedom Watch being a successful show. And I think I remember you took that memo to Roger Ailes, and it was a small part of helping that show get on the air. It's sort of fascinating how everything weaves together and how we're all connected into this, and how some of us are rivals, right? And there's friendly competition, and then there's not so friendly competition. But I've been really thankful for the relationship that you and I have built over the years, Judge, because it has been a lasting and enduring friendship that I think does inspire many of the people who watch my show, because they so anticipate our conversations, and the depth of the knowledge and the experience that you have had is just unrivaled. And I like to think back to the days of you being in Kansas City, at the Republican presidential convention supporting Ronald Reagan, and being a young principled activist as I was at one time. And to see how far you've come, Judge, it's certainly been an inspiring career. And
Oh,
I am thankful for our friendship, and I always, of course, cheer for your success.
well, the feeling is mutual. I do about 10 or 15 of these a week. None big brain like this one is, none with a protege of mine whom I want to see exceed and excel what I've attempted to achieve.
Well, Judge Napolitano joining us now. He is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your mobile devices. Of course, we're glad to have him here every Wednesday on the program. So, Judge, Tucker Carlson out. I mean, are they trying to sell Fox News? Is that what's happening here? Are they trying to be more mainstream? And it struck me as a little bit, I don't know, chilly, the tone, when I saw Brian Kilmeade taking over the other day. And Brian Kilmeade's written some decent books, but he's no Tucker Carlson. I mean, do they even have a bench? What's next for Fox?
I don't know the answer to any of those questions, except their pattern has been to rotate people through. I mean, Brian is a workaholic, but he can't really do the 6 a.m. Fox and Friends and 8 p.m. Tucker Carlson on a regular basis. I suppose they could pre tape the 8 p.m. show during the afternoon. Um, but I don't want to criticize Brian, who's been my friend for many years and who's the personification of energy. But I think they're going to rotate people through until they come up with what they think is just right for them. They may want to dial back some of Tucker's statements that they perceive as extreme, but I can't imagine them leaving the conservative wing of the conservative party, whatever it means to be a conservative today. I don't know what that means, but there are people who call themselves conservative Republicans, and they have flocked to Fox, and Fox management knows that they don't want to lose that base. So whoever comes on that time slot will be someone whom they believe will maintain or grow the base without the controversy that Carlson caused.
It almost seemed, Judge, as if Roger Ailes had a magic touch, like a King Midas. Everything he touched turned to gold. I'll never forget when Glenn Beck left the network and they replaced it with the Five. I think at first you and I and many other people were like, "What is this? The Five?" Right? And they were rotating hosts and things like that, and nobody really understood the kind of the concept that they were going for. But it exploded, turned into a huge hit. I mean, Roger Ailes always knew what he was doing. Do you think that Fox still has that kind of a brain trust? I know it was a great loss with Ailes, but I mean, is there anybody there now who has that kind of Midas touch at all, or has that kind of that same level of raw talent that Ailes had?
In a word, no. I mean, Ailes was a genius, a television genius. It was also one of the it's a C minus student at Miami of Ohio University, and one of the smartest human beings I have ever met. Ailes had a genius for what works on the screen. If you were in his office, there were about 25 television screens, all with the sound off. He goes, I don't need to hear what people say. I know whether or not it sells by what I see. Television is visual, it is not audio. Okay, when you say taxation is theft, I know your libertarian people go crazy because they want to hear it, but it's more visual. It's more visual than it is audio. And Ailes had, we all have talents and instincts. His talent and instinct was what sells, what causes eyeballs to turn on the screen. Maybe Fox will find somebody in management like that. And if there's somebody there like that today, they came after I left. I don't know who it is.